So today let's go over how to set up a video overlay within AEMdata. So at this point you should have a data log opened up within AEMdata and a track map created, which we have shown you how to do in previous videos. If you haven't seen those, we'll go ahead and link those up in the top right hand corner so you can figure out how we got here. So first step to creating a video overlay is that we need to change the video to a WebM file. Now your video can be taken by any sort of video recording device, whether it's a phone or some sort of camera that you have. Anything that can spit out like an MP4 or WMV, anything that can create those video files. MP4 files usually tend to be the most popular, so today we're going to use a video that is in MP4 taken from a GoPro. And then we will go ahead and convert that to a WebM format. In order to do that, we're going to need to use the WebM transcoder. Now the transcoder should come in with AEMdata, but if you don't have it, then try to reinstall AEMdata, and then during the setup wizard, you can go ahead and just click that you want to install the transcoder, and then go ahead and click yes, and then you'll have it. So now that you have the transcoder, let's just go ahead and open that up. So now that we have the transcoder, we're going to need to drop some files in the middle box there. So we'll go ahead and grab our video here and then drop that into the transcoder. So we're going to need to set up our options as far as the WebM format goes. So we can pick our video codec type. The settings that are already here usually work pretty fine, but if you want to go ahead and just adjust them a little bit to work with the video that you have, you can go ahead and do that. But we're going to go ahead and stick with the default settings that you can see right here. So first you're going to need to be able to set up a new save location for your WebM format. We'll just name this session 1. And once it's ready, just go ahead and click go. Now this could take a while, especially if you have a slower computer or if this is a bigger file. It could take 20 or 30 minutes or even more. So we'll go ahead and let this complete, and once you see it completed, you'll see a new file in this folder that you chose. Alright, so now you'll see that it's done. And now we can go ahead and load this into AEMdata. So in order to do this, we'll go ahead and open up the software. So next we're going to need to create a new video window. We can create a new tab just to help with the organization of the software a bit. We can just name this new tab video. And we can see that this is blank, so we can go ahead and right click and go to add view and then go to new video or just video. We'll just put that over there. It is helpful to have some kind of trace or video overlay on your screen like this as well. You can create a new one from scratch, but we'll just go ahead and copy this one since this one looks good already. So if you go ahead and just move that down a little bit and then left click and drag, it will start highlighting these windows that you want. So in our case, we just want to highlight this main window, so we'll go ahead and right click and then copy. And then we'll go back to the video tab and then do paste views. So now we have the exact copy of that new trace in our new window. This will come in handy a little bit later, and let's go ahead and just move that down a little bit, make it a little bit smaller so we have more room for our video window. And now we need to go ahead and open up our video. And we'll go ahead and select that new file that we just rendered. Alright, so we've selected our file and we've got our data opened. Now what we need to do is sync the data and the video together. So this does have to be done manually, and it's going to take a little bit of work, but I'll show you the best ways to do this and sync the data and video. So what we need to do here is find a point in our data and a point in our video where they can sync up. A few examples of this could maybe be a gear shift that you can see, or maybe a steering angle. If it's a drag racing video, then maybe you can time it with the launch between the data and the video. In our case, we're going to go ahead and use our steering angle, but we can also use our gear shifts throughout the video to help time it. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's add the steering angle to our data log. Alright, so it's added. So now you can see that when I drag my cursor along our data here, it seems like they're in sync because they're moving together, but both the video and the data are just starting at their 0 points. And realistically, that's not going to be two files synced together. It's pretty unlikely that you hit the record button at the exact same time that the data started logging. So there's usually some sort of offset between the two. And that's the whole point of the sync process, is to bring these two together. So let's go ahead and zoom in into our data and kind of see what's going on. So we can see that there's a little bit of idling here at the beginning, and then right over here is when the car starts to drive away. You can see the first, second, and third gear. So let's go ahead and mark that point exactly where the car starts to move forward. So how we're going to actually mark it is go up to our video configuration up there, and then we're going to want to go to log time 1. This is exactly where we're going to want to sync our video and data. So we're going to have to look at our data and find the exact spot where the car started moving, and then we're going to have to go to our video and find that also exact same spot. So we're going to start by clicking right here, which is our log set point. So you can see when we hit that it marks the exact 12 minutes, exactly where our blue cursor was over there on the data. So now that we've matched that point with the data, now we need to go to the video and match that also exact same point when the car was starting. So we'll move this a little bit so we can get a better view. So we're using this trace right now to scroll through the video, and it looks like it's right about here. So let's mark that as the video point. So that'll get us pretty close, but we do want to double check it though, because we want this to be as close as possible. One way to do that is to look at the shift point like I was talking about earlier. We kind of have one right here. You can see right in that trench is exactly where the shift was. That's a great indicator for syncing up our video and data. So as I go over this and look at it, it actually looks pretty close. If anything, it's just a little bit off. Looks like the driver's just shifting a little bit before the data got it. So using that, we can offset it and make this perfect. So we can manually edit these and just make them perfect. So after that, it looks much better. But to make it even better than that, we can also use steering angle. So we want to go to a spot where there's some quick steering input going on. So right here, that red line is our steering angle. So let's compare that to what the driver is actually doing. So we're going to be looking for that peak spot where the steering wheel is turned the furthest, because that will be our spot where we can sync this. So if we're looking at it, we can see right about here is where our peak steering angle is, and it looks almost dead on to what we had before, synchronization wise. It just looks very, very close. So we're just going to need to offset this just a little bit, maybe by 100 milliseconds or so. So let's move this to 0.2. And that looks about perfect. You can see that our steering angle is at its max, and you can also see that that's where the steepest line is. So it looks like our video and our overlay are perfectly in sync. Now obviously I'm being a little bit of a perfectionist here, but adding that little bit of perfection can really make your video look incredibly well done. So it looks like we're about finished with all this manual syncing. You really don't have to use this option here, but maybe your frame rate isn't set properly on your video. You may have a case where your log and your video are playing at two separate speeds. Like say they start at the exact same point, but once you get to the end of the video and the end of the log, they end at different points. Then you might be using the 2-point sync to help you out here. But usually that just stems from the actual issues in the video that you put in. Usually we wouldn't recommend this though, mostly because it's incredibly difficult and it may not entirely fix the problem with your video. So now that we're done with this, you can scroll through all of your data and you can see that everything is perfectly in sync with your video. You could go through and check everything, but usually things will be fine. Like say we go in and zoom in right here, we can kind of see that little low point right there, we can see the shift in the video. So it looks like everything is still synced up nicely. Alright, so now that we're done with that, the next thing we're going to do is create overlays on our video. First thing you want to do is right click on your video, and let's say we want to add a gauge. Then we can go through, and I'll show you all of these, but let's say the first thing you want to add is a bar. This is just your standard bar graph. Say you wanted to set up throttle, then we can do that. You can go ahead and click on the bar, and then for channel, we can go ahead and type in throttle, and then bring that up. Now we can set the options here for the throttle. I'm going to go ahead and choose a vertical graph. So notice that you can also move around this bar graph while you have this configuration window set up. That'll be super helpful, especially when you want to look at both at the same time and kind of move things around. So let's go ahead and change the text color because it's kind of hard to see right here. So under colors, we can go to text, and then let's say we want to change that to white. And that looks good. You can also change the font size to whatever you want, so you can go and you can click fixed size, and then let's go ahead and try 12. And that looks good. So you can really change this bar graph however you want. You can go to the vertical checkbox, for example, and change it to either a horizontal or vertical bar graph, whichever one works better for you. Show value is pretty self-explanatory. It shows the value of the channel at the bottom there. Labels shows all your value labels on the right side or whichever side you want. For us, we're going to turn it off. I believe it's a little bit distracting. I don't think we'll need it. Background ticks show those little lines on your graph like that. We're going to go ahead and turn those off too. I just prefer those off. It just looks a little bit cleaner that way. You can decide whether or not you want to turn on or off the border. You could also turn the background on or off, which is pretty neat. So say you want to have your bar down in the lower right hand corner. We'll go ahead and make that a little bit smaller. Then you can see that the video will be the background of the bar. So we'll leave ours that way. I think it looks a little bit neater that way. So now we have our throttle bar there however you want it. You also may want to label it so your viewers know exactly what that bar graph represents. So if you right click and then go to gauge and then label, you can add a label to it. So we'll call this one throttle percent. Then we'll change our font size to something that we like. Then we can also change our color for something that matches the video. And then we'll change the actual text of the label to also read throttle percent. And then we're good to go, so we'll press OK, and I think that looks pretty good. You can also add an image to this, so if you have some sort of graphic that you want to add, you can put that in there too. So we'll use our logo here as an example. You can click size to fit and then OK. Then you can resize it however you want. We'll put it up in the top right hand corner. The number option lets you display a particular channel just as a number value. So say you just want to have your boost pressure as a number on screen, then you can do that using this. The radar lets you set lateral or longitudinal acceleration values. Let's actually go ahead and set up one of those right now. So we'll click radar, and then we'll drop it down here, and then we'll configure it. So for channels, we can go ahead and add a new one here. For X, we could do acceleration X. For Y, we can use acceleration Y. We won't need a Z for this, just because we're working with a 2D mode right now. So you can use Z for vertical acceleration, but since we're just using lateral and longitudinal, we're not going to need it. So the range lets us say the maximum G-force for this car. We'll go ahead and say 1.5 for this car. And for divisions, we'll use 3, just so each division can be half of a G. So now you can see that as we move through the video, the tracer on the radar is moving correctly with us. We can also change the label size just so it gets a little bit easier to read. We can go ahead and try 20. Looks like we'll need a little bit bigger, so we'll say 24. And that looks pretty good. Alright, so now we can also add a status light, a tacho, and a track map. Let's go ahead and add a tacho right now. This allows you to display really anything. It doesn't have to be RPM. It'll display any channel that you want as a tactile needle. So let's actually go ahead and put RPM up on here. So let's go ahead and click on this tacho here. And then for the channel, let's go ahead and choose engine speed. And for our inner label, we can go ahead and put RPM. So now we need to select our min and max RPM that we want to show. So let's go ahead and go up to 9,000 for RPM. And so for major ticks, that's going to go ahead and display how many of those big white ticks that you have on your tacho. Usually it should be one more than the full RPM range that you're going to. So if we chose 0 to 9,000, then we would go ahead and put 10, so we can go 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and so on, just so we're one above our actual 9,000 range. So that looks pretty good there. Let's say if we went down to 5, it would only show you 5 ticks on here. But let's go ahead and change it back to 10. You can also use a multiplier here to change how the numbers look. So let's say we put it at 0.001, then it will only display whole numbers. And if we change our decimals down here to only be 0, then they really look like whole numbers. Let's also go ahead and increase our font size a little bit. So now we have ourselves a nice working tacho on our video. If you want to disable the full value text down here, that's pretty easy. It always makes it look a lot cleaner. So we'll go ahead and unclick show value text, and now it just looks much better. So now we can change the size of this gauge, kind of move it over here. We'll move some things around a bit, kind of make everything look clean and nice. We can also create some thresholds, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll say anywhere between 8,000 and 8250 will be yellow. Now we can create another one. We'll say anywhere between 8250 and 9,000 will be red. And you can see what it's creating right over there on our tacho. You can also change any of the tacho's background color or text color. You can also change the image for the gauge. Right now we have a pretty basic kind of just gray gauge here, but say if you created another one in another piece of software, you could also change that in with this one. You can also just change the background off, so it's kind of a see-through gauge. This also allows you to place your needle up on top of the graphic that you want for your gauge. We'll keep it simple for this video, so we'll just stick with this gauge. Let's also go ahead and add our track map here. Once you do that, it's pretty much already set up for us. Let's go ahead and just adjust the size, make it look nice, and we'll put it up over here. Now if you want to adjust how your track map looks, you're going to have to do it back here in your track map settings. If you want to adjust the line width, make it look a little bit thicker looking, then you can do that too. So you can see that as we scroll through the data, you can see that little tracer on the track map is moving with us. So let's do one more thing here as an example. Let's go ahead and pick a number so we can put down our gear numbers here. So for channel, we'll do gear. Now notice that it's displaying with a decimal point here, which is something that we don't really want with gear. So in order to fix that, we're going to have to go back to our channel list. We'll find the gear channel and we'll see that it's also displaying a decimal point there. So we'll click on it and then go to channel properties and then go to decimal points and make that 0. And once you do that, you'll see that it is now displaying properly. Let's go ahead and change it to a white color to make it match. We can actually shrink it down a bit, and we can also just put that in our gauge here. So now we'll have not only RPM, but we'll also have our gear indicator right in the middle of that. We can also put a label underneath that specifies that it is the gear. So now that you're happy with your video, you can right click on it and go to Encode Video. So we'll start off by choosing an output file, so we'll find out where we can save this and what we can name it. For this one, we'll call it Session 1 Final Data Overlay. So you can also select a range, so that means what part of the video you actually want to render. So before you render everything out, I would recommend just rendering maybe a small chunk of it, maybe like a minute or two, just to make sure everything's alright and everything will come out perfect and how you want it. So we'll do that. We'll choose a very small portion and then we'll render that out, make sure it looks how we want it to. We'll go ahead and choose this small section right here. So once you select your area, you can go ahead and go to range and then go down to selection. So it looks like it will only render about 7 or 8 seconds worth of data. Under video codec, we can go same as source just to keep everything similar. So for the quality, we'll go ahead and go low right here just so we can render this out fast and kind of make sure that everything's good. Once we do our final render, then we'll make sure it's the highest quality possible. If you're using the VP9, then you can also do lossless. For us, we're going to stick with everything around auto, just make sure everything looks good before we render it out to its best quality. So then you can go ahead and click OK, and it'll take a few seconds to render out this video. And once it's complete, we can go ahead and open up our newly rendered video. Again, notice that the quality is pretty low right now, but that's just because we wanted to render this one out fast. So for the most part, it looks pretty good. There's a couple things we're going to need to play around with, like how the AEM logo is kind of cut off a little bit. The text on our gauge is a little small, so we may have to enlarge that a little bit. And same with the throttle. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and just make a few small changes here. Let's go ahead and increase the font size a little bit. Now sometimes, since the resolution of the software and the resolution of the video that's coming out is different, it may look like the text here is incredibly large, but when you render it out, it will look completely fine. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're starting to render this stuff out. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit and speed this up too. So again, remember, if this is your first time doing this, it may take you a couple times to really get this perfect, but that's totally fine. So now that we have it how we like it, we can go ahead and encode the video. This time we'll do the best encode so we can get a nice high quality video. So I won't render this out right now, but I'll give you guys a quick video example of what this can look like when you really have everything going. So here's a video here that can show us a bunch of different things. We can see there we have the roll, pitch, and the yaw. We have the traction control percentage right over here. We also have the tire load percentage over here, which is actually a math channel. So it's calculating the load on the tire based on the G-forces on it. We also have the gear and GPS mile per hour on our tacho there, as well as the throttle and the brake forces there. So everything looks great, and we'd love to see you guys make some great videos with our software here. Feel free to send us those videos over social media too. Who knows, maybe we'll share out our favorites. If you have any other questions about AEMdata, make sure to let us know in the comments so we can help you guys out. And make sure you subscribe so you can learn more about AEMdata.